Welcome back, everybody. We now have Mark Heley, who's going to be discussing some of the theories about 2012 paradigm shift. Now, Mark runs the Peace 2012 group, and you can see their website. He's got all the website details in his lecture. He's also author of the Everything Guide to 2012, and he's working on another book as we speak. So he's going to give an outline, which sounds slightly more positive than the previous lectures. So please give a warm welcome to Mark Heley.
Thanks, everyone. So one of the first things that we can do is dispense with the idea that 2012 is the end of the world, because this is just a pop myth. In fact, the Mayans never said that at all. And the origin of the idea that 2012 was somehow the end of the world was actually a speculation by a Mayanist scholar named Michael Coe back in 1966. So we heard Jonathan talk about it, but what we're going to talk about today is really what 2012 is really about, and what is it that's going on. So what I'm hoping to do today is to give you a simple explanation of what the Mayan calendar really is, what it represents, and how to understand it in terms of its relationship to our culture in a really simple way. And also, since we're on the cusp of 2012, I'm hoping to inspire you a little bit, because it's not just about waiting for 2012 to happen. It's about, I think, or at least I like to make the case for the fact that it's really about what we do in the build-up to 2012. So I'm going to begin by just doing a very brief intro on the Maya themselves. So the Maya come from basically from Central America and this region here, this area, which is now modern-day Mexico and Guatemala. And the Maya are still around. They're living in indigenous communities. Most of the indigenous communities today are concentrated around Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, where they're still living. So it's not like we're dealing with a culture that has completely disappeared, but the culture that created the calendar and familiar from sites like this that built these pyramids and these ceremonial sites. This culture was really in florescence for about 600 years, between 300 and 900 AD. And a lot of what we know about the Mayan calendrical system, and in fact about 2012, isn't so much from the indigenous Maya today. It's from this culture and interpretations that have been made from studying the glyphs which were recorded on these sites. And they're basically carved in stone largely. They also appear on books which they made out of papyrus, long scrolls. There are only 4 of these surviving today, unfortunately. When the European invasion happened, there were in fact hundreds of thousands of Mayan painted books, but these were burnt by the invading conquistadors, which is a real tragedy. So what's happened over the last century really is that we've rediscovered the Maya, and the interpretation of the Mayan glyphs has been a long ongoing project in really a group of independently minded investigators have been studying this for a really long period of time and really cracking the code that led to us understanding that this cycle finishes on December 21st, 2012, was really one of the greatest intellectual achievements of the 20th century. It took a lot of people studying these glyphs from a lot of different disciplines to actually really have this breakthrough. So I'm going to begin by just kind of like explaining a little bit about how the Mayan calendrical system works. I'm not going to go too deep because it's like there's a lot to it, but it's important to have a basic understanding of what we're talking about here. So the Maya had the simplest number system ever devised. It really consists only of 3 symbols, and you can see here at the top, this is a shell symbol, and that represents 0. Now, the Maya had the concept of 0 hundreds and hundreds of years before it appeared in the West. So they're a very advanced mathematical society. And when in this country we were using Roman numerals, which don't have a concept of 0, the Maya had developed this, it dates from at least 300 BC. So in fact, it's a pre-Mayan counting system, but it's the system that the Maya used. And then you've got basically a dot for 1 and 2 dots for 2. And then you build up to 4 dots here. And when you reach 5, you get a bar. So you continue by just putting dots over the bar. And as you can see, it basically continues in this way until you get 2 bars and then 3. And finally in the corner here, you get 4 dots above 3 bars. And this is a counting system which is based on base 20 rather than base 10. So in the West, what we do is we use 1 to 10. So we're used to counting on our fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. But what the Maya were doing, they used base 20. So they were counting on their fingers and toes. That's the way you can visualize it. It's a very effective mathematical system, and it allows them to compute large numbers very, very easily. So there's another way of looking at this, and these are representations of these 20 glyphs or day signs, which really comprise the core of the Mayan calendrical system. Now there's different layers that are built on top of this, but it always basically comes down to this cycle of 20 repeating days. So you start at the top here, top left-hand corner, with this glyph, which is called Imish, and or alligator, dragon, beginning, and then you go to wind, house, seed, and you continue all the way down to sun, which is the 20th glyph, and then the cycle repeats again at the top with Imish again. So this is basically just another way of showing this, which is the Mayan counting system, but this time you've got pictograms. So that there's not just a quantity that's ascribed to this way of counting. Each of the days also has an energy associated with it. So, for instance, wind is representative of the breath and spirit and other associations. And that's something that we've lost touch with in the calendar we're using today in the modern world, because we don't have a notion of there being a quality of time ascribed to each individual day. We just have a quantity. Time is money is kind of the idea which is really like embedded in culture at the moment. So I'm just going to kind of go through this very quickly, but this basic 20 day sign repeating cycle builds up into something that looks like this. And this is just the 20 day signs, which you saw on the previous screen, just put on the side of this diagram here. So you got 20 rows, and then to create this matrix, which is called the Zolkin, which is a 260-day repeating cycle, you have 13 variations on each of these 20 day signs, and you start at the top left-hand corner and you go down, and when you reach 13 in this particular case, you go back to 1 again. So this whole cycle repeats in a 260-day cycle. And these are biological numbers. You've got 20 is the number of fingers and toes. 13 are the major articulations of the body. And the 260-day cycle is the approximation of gestation of the human baby, basically from the last menstrual cycle to birth as an average. And this is still the way that the indigenous Maya teach the kids the calendar. So it's rooted in biology. It's not something which is being made up or is like particularly specific to the Mayan culture. You know, a lot of times when I start talking about the Mayan calendar, people think that I'm going to be talking about wisdom from the Mayan people and what their culture was about. Well, yeah, that's contained within it, but actually what we're looking at here is a different culture and a different civilization. And there are insights in their system of time reckoning that we can really use today, because one thing it does, it brings into focus the way that we calculate time. So it's not just about the Mayan calendar, it's about ways of reckoning time and what they really mean. So to come back to 2012, we can just look at this is just like another kind of chart of different correspondences with this 260-day cycle, and then physical things basically in our solar system. So it's a remarkable coincidence that all of these correlations with different planetary cycles, both of the sun, the moon, the Earth, and Mars, and other planets, are actually related to this 260 cycle. And some people have suggested this is because actually this timing frequency, this number constant, is actually a bit like the DNA of time. Like this is what is basically being like articulated in this structure. So it reflects biology and it's embedded in biology, and it has all of these kind of like relationships to actual real cycles that are happening in our solar system and on our planet. Now, 2012 is basically about a bigger cycle of this 260-day repeating cycle, which is a 5,125-year period, which is basically coming to a close on December 21st, 2012. And this is the technical expression of it. So the start date was up here, August the 11th, 3114 BC, and the end date, which is basically looking the same, is December 21st, 2012. And this representation here, drawn by my good friend Jeff Stray, who's also has written about and spoken about the 2012 story. He actually drew what this would look like in terms of its Mayan glyphs. So this is a very complex rendition of all the different levels and cycles which are actually happening in the Mayan calendar. But basically, the take-home point is that it's a 5,125-year cycle that we're dealing with here. So the idea of the end of the world was something that was introduced by a speculative interpretation coming from a Western mindset. And although the Maya see the world as a series of creations which end in cycles, often with flooding or earthquakes, the modern notion of the end of the world as some sort of like apocalypse is actually a projection of Judeo-Christian ideas onto an indigenous culture which never really had those. So, we have to be really careful about interpreting this because, what's happened is that if you talk to the average person in the street, a lot of people heard about 2012 and most of them have heard that it's the end of the world. So, we're in the situation where, okay, that's what I think, but actually there's a lot that we can learn from the Mayan culture, and that there's really relevant consequences. This isn't just about a culture that existed sometime in the past and, it's disappeared now and we've superseded it and we've moved on. Actually, this is a culture that has a time reckoning system and an understanding of the cycles of natural time that we've lost touch with in the Western world. So, if we'd found this stele on the moon, that's what it's called, this carving, we'd be looking at studying the Maya as an advanced civilization. We have this notion of ETs that are more advanced than us. Well, we are using at the moment in the world a calendar system which is based on one particular religion, and that doesn't really actually mean anything when you look at it in terms of the cycles of natural time. We don't even incorporate the moon into our calendar. The word month originally meant moon, and originally in the old British calendar there was the moon cycles were taken into account, but at the moment we have a calendar which is based on a accretion of dogma, and it isn't really about a scientific understanding of the world. So that particular filter that we have about looking about civilizations which are in the past as being inferior or less developed is one of the things we have to immediately challenge, because to be honest, if we stack up the Mayan calendrical system with the Gregorian calendar system, which is the one we're using, the Mayan calendar system comes out way ahead. It integrates the cycles of the Earth, the Moon, many of the planets, and it puts them together in a way of understanding time which isn't just about an arbitrary division, but is really representing cycles that are actually happening in our solar system and in our world. So that's one of the really important things to look at here is, it's easy to think, well, the Maya, how are they relevant to me? But actually, what we have to see is that we're coming from a very blinkered place culturally, and our understanding of time is really a reflection of that we have a lot to learn here. So, the idea of there being a quality of time as well as a quantity is one of the really key things. I mean, Has anyone here, and it's pretty obvious stuff, felt the difference between a full moon and a new moon? Show of hands. They feel different now. Yeah, so that's something that we all know, but we don't reckon that into our counting system. What we actually do is that we just divide the solar year up, and that's pretty much it. There are two units that we actually look at. That's the day, which is a real thing. It's the rotation of the Earth. And then there's the year, which is the rotation of the Earth around the sun. But the moon isn't included, and we don't have a sense of there being natural cycles. And in fact, within the Gregorian calendar, there are lots of very strange, arbitrary, and irrational things. Like, a good example is the month September. Okay, what does the month September mean? What does that word mean? Does anyone know? Yeah, it means the 7th month. There's one slight problem with that. It's actually the 9th month. Okay, so that's irrational to begin with. Why is it like that? Well, originally the Roman calendar had 10 months, and then it was reformed by Julius Caesar, and he said, well, I'd like a month, please. And he stuck a month in the middle of the year, and it's called June. We're in it. Or July, rather, sorry. That's why we have an extra month there. And Augustus came along after him, and he said, well, if it's good enough for Julius, I want a month too, and therefore we have August. So we have a calendar system that we need to look at ourselves. And there's a notion that we have within our culture that time moves into the future like an irreversible arrow. And actually, this is a cultural convention. This is not like something which is really existing in the cycles of time and the cycles of nature. And we see in the cycles of nature that there's ebbs and flows. There are seasons. So we see like that in the course of a solar year, you have winter, spring, and summer. And what the Maya are alluding to here are bigger cycles that have those qualities. So when we talk about the end of the world, actually what we're talking about is a Judeo-Christian projection onto the Mayan calendar. And really, if something's ending, it's the Gregorian calendar, because what happened when the conquistadors discovered the Maya was that they realized it was a more advanced culture, and they took as much stuff as they could, took it back to the Vatican, and the Vatican had known that their calendar was way out of sync for a long period of time, but there'd been real will to change it. But when they discovered the devil's calendar, with its fiendish accuracy, there was okay. Let's sort our calendar out and actually let's make it like at least like work within its own tenets. So it's already had an influence on the way the West calculates time. And really, if you stand the two next to each other in a simple A/B comparison, the Mayan calendar system is a more sophisticated, more naturally integrated system. That's my basic contention here. So in studying it, let's like take out that cultural lens of looking at things that are in the past as being inferior and indigenous cultures as knowing less than us, and actually give them the benefit of the doubt for a moment. So some interpretations of what this calendar means. This is a diagram from a book called The Mayan Factor that was written by Jose Arguelles back in '87. He's one of the great pioneers of this whole 2012 cosmology that's become slightly warped in the public domain through things like the Hollywood movie that basically is like a huge disaster piece. But the idea that he had about interpreting this 5,125-year cycle was actually using that module, this 260-day repeating cycle that you saw earlier. And here it is again. It's this 260-day box. And the insight that he had was that it's a really remarkable thing that this 5,125-year cycle kind of corresponds to history. So at the very beginning, in this top corner, way back in 3114 BC, you see the very, very beginnings of Sumerian culture, and then very shortly after, the very beginnings of ancient Egypt. So what he suggested is, well, maybe what we can do here is we can read this 13 Bacton cycle as a kind of roadmap of history. This kind of gives us a level of meaning that doesn't exist within our current time sense. In the Gregorian calendar, all we're really talking about is 1 year more per year into an infinite horizon. There's no kind of like idea of cyclical completion. And this is an interpretation by a Westerner, but what he like saw was, well, okay, like if we think about it like that, isn't it remarkable? We're right down here in this last square. And we've seen this amazing evolution of history that is like sped up. I mean, right to here, you've got the birth of Buddha. And then, you know, the kind of, this is like the area of modern history. You've got the Industrial Revolution is kind of somewhere down here. And the 20th century passes by really quickly over here. And, well, you know, if you see it as like a 5,125 page like book, we're pretty much on the last page. And it's a cliffhanger. So what will happen in this last page? And this idea has really helped generate a whole kind of like other form of 2012 mythos, where people are really seeing it as a convergence point or some sort of omega point, and we'll come to that in a little bit. So I think it's also really important to mention what the actual Mayan elders are saying about this shift, because think about the indigenous Mayas. They lost knowledge of the December 21st, 2012 date some hundreds of years ago, and they've lived underneath a conquest which forced them to adapt to the invaders' religion, Christianity, and keeping their traditions alive is something that has cost the lives of many, many Mayans. And as recently as 20 years ago, the Mayan people were fighting a battle for survival in Guatemala, where death squads would be assassinating indigenous leaders, and tens of thousands of Mayans died during that period. So there's now something happening which is called the Mayan Renaissance, or it's basically a coming out of this remarkable culture that survived. And there is a prophetic tradition within the Maya that they've kept all the way through that period. What's also remarkable is that although they lost the end date, the day, the actual glyph that we saw earlier, is exactly the same today as it was 800 years ago. So this is a continuous tradition. These aren't people who are basically like, you know, completely separated from that original culture. Obviously, it's taken a different form. So what they're saying, and basically what happened is that the Mayan got pretty sick of being asked about what was happening in 2012. And they said, look, let's all get together, and anyone who really knows about our prophetic traditions, we'll have them all come together and they'll discuss it, and basically then we'll release to the world what we think is happening during this time. And this is what they came up with. And basically, it's not something which is specifically happening on the day December 21st, 2012. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen as late as 2015, and it kind of changed the parameters a little bit sometimes. It's you know, this is a felt thing. It's not some sort of like technical story. It comes through the oral tradition of the Mayan people, and they're saying that what's going to happen during this period is the sky will go dark, and it will go dark for a period of time. It could be a day, it could be 2 days. The thing to do during this change, during this shift, is basically not to panic. That this is a natural thing that's occurring, and the people that really are going to come to harm are those that don't understand this and think it's the end of the world. So, you know, crazily enough, we have a self-fulfilling prophecy that's loaded into our belief systems, and it's the prophecy itself which might, in fact, lead people to doing really crazy things. So they're saying that this is basically a cleansing period. It's the end of a cycle, but a new cycle is beginning afterwards. And this is really important to understand, is that there is a process occurring which is a natural phenomenon. It's not something that it's not like Mayan voodoo or some sort of like, you know, their predictions are based on the observations of the natural world. So I think a lot of people realize that we're in a period where time is apparently speeding up, and that certain like things are like not continue. You know, we can't continue having an infinitely increasing population and a diminishing resource base. So there's going to be some changes. So to come to another point, and I'm not going to talk actually too long about the technical aspects of 2012, but another important thing to understand is that during this period, and it's not just on December 21st, 2012, but it's over a 30-odd year period. Around this time, there is this galactic alignment happening. And basically what this is that if you observe the winter solstice sunrise, which is also December 21st, 2012, it basically rises during this period of time, about 30-year period, right on the galactic equator. Now, this only happens once every 26,000 years, so it's a remarkable thing that the Maya were tracking, certainly according to the work of John Major Jenkins, who put forward this theory in a really remarkable book of scholarship called Maya Cosmogenesis 2012. It's a really brilliantly insightful book. And what he saw was that there is, in the Maya mythology, they play a game called the ball game, which is it's found all over Mesoamerica, is that this is actually a cosmological reenactment of the alignment which is happening at the moment. So during the game, the idea is to put this small rubber ball through a hoop which is high up on the side of this ball court with your elbow or with your knee. It's quite a difficult game to play. And the ball going through the hole is actually a representation, according to John Major Jenkins, of this alignment, because it's remarkable, but at places like Izapa, where he came up with this idea, the winter solstice sunrise rise directly behind the Mayan ball court. So in their cosmology, they have this thing ingrained, and the ball represents the sun, and the goal represents this dark rift. It's a dark constellation. You can't actually see the center of the galaxy because there's interstellar dust clouds between us and it. And if you look up into the night sky, and it's easier to see this in the Maya land than it is currently here, what you see is this vast band of the Milky Way stretching across the sky. And in the middle of that, you've got these dark patches. And this is actually where the galactic equator is. And in the Mayan mythology, this is also the mouth of the underworld of Xibalba. And what happens is the sun disappears into the mouth of Xibalba, and then is reborn into a new sun. So there's a really compelling case that's being made here for this being a convergence point, for this being a cycle of renewal, and for this to be something which is really, really significant. I mean, this is a ball court that was built in Zapa. It was actually pre-Mayan culture, of the beginning of Mayan culture, built something like 1,500 years ago, but the alignment that they're measuring is actually to something which is happening in our era. So it was very, very important to the Mayan people, so much so that they actually aligned their temples 1,500 years before this alignment was occurring to the alignment which is now. So this is another way of looking at the galactic alignment. This is actually a computer rendition of what it looked like on winter solstice 1999, and that was particularly significant because you had a full moon at that date. And what you can see here is that you've got a simple line where you've got the galaxy, the sun, the earth, and the moon all in alignment. So this is something which is actually really happening in the physical world. Now, this doesn't mean that we're crossing through the center of the galaxy. That's not how it works. It's actually an optical alignment that's visible from our planet only. So it's a significant thing, but it's not like we actually move around the galaxy as well, which is I'm going to talk about that. But I don't think that it's a coincidence at all that this is a galactic alignment. And I'm not saying that the Maya had an understanding of the modern way that we think about a galaxy existing. People say, well, they didn't have telescopes. How do they know about the galaxy? In fact, we only really discovered that we orbited around this galaxy in the 1930s. So, but what they did have as an understanding of, they understand the mythological importance of the Milky Way, and also they understood these cycles of time which repeat only once every 26,000 years. And those are the important things, because they were really talking about world ages on our planet. So, what's really happening here? Well, if we go one layer deeper about, okay, what is the paradigm shift that's occurring in 2012? Well, the last paradigm shift that we had was really the Copernican Revolution, and this is when we went from the understanding that which was basically before the time of Copernicus, or called the Ptolemaic view, or the Greek system, where the Earth was at the center. So we're at the center of everything, and the sun and all the planets orbit around us. And obviously, in that cosmology, we're really important. We're at the center of everything, and humans are the most important thing on the most important place. Now, this was slightly displaced by the Copernican worldview, which was extremely contentious. It got, like, Galileo, for example, into a lot of trouble talking about this. And Copernicus basically said, well, what if we say the sun's at the center and then we orbit around it? And this actually solved a very, very significant mathematical problem, which is that if you look at the positions of the planets in the sky, they don't just move around in a straight line. They come to standstills. So when, in fact, they go back, they stand still and they go in a loop, they move backwards and then forwards. So when we say Mercury is retrograde, that's what we're talking about. It's basically describing this backwards loop in the sky. And in the medieval times, the scholars and monks and astronomers of that time were really concerned about this. They were like, well, why did the planets do this weird stuff? And they came up with these really complicated, hugely labyrinthine theories to explain epicycles, which is this phenomenon. And basically Copernicus just did away with it. And that's a really good example of like what happens in a scientific paradigm shift, is that there is a fundamental change of our understanding in the place of the universe, and somehow things get simplified by this. That's a really important part. So I'm going to suggest that we're going through another paradigm shift right now, and actually 2012 is a kind of fulcrum point around which this is being coordinated. And the new Copernican Revolution is based around an exactly parallel situation. Here we have the Copernican system, which is the heliocentric model. So we go around the sun, and there's only one new idea in the new paradigm, or the galactic paradigm. And that is the discovery that our sun actually orbits around the galaxy. So that's what we've discovered. And that might not seem that important, but what it does, it completely shifts the center of our universe again. For a long time now, we've thought of ourselves as the member of a privileged club. We're just, one of 7 or 8 planets, and ours is the only one which is habitable for life. So we're really thinking of ourselves as being like the center of everything and really, really important. Well, actually what we're discovering is that we're not at the center. This is the local center. This is the galactic center. And we are actually one of billions of solar systems that are orbiting around this galactic center. So let's see where we are. Well, this is another way of viewing it. So like we have this idea. If you look at like a textbook that's sort of describing our solar system, you see these circular orbits. Well, that's not actually what's happening from a galactic point of view. What's happening from the galactic point of view is that the sun here is moving, and each of the planets are moving around the sun like in a spiral fashion. So this again really removes this idea of like the simple ellipses that were really how we saw planetary motions previously. So we're never coming back to the same point in space. We're always moving forward, and basically everything is a spiral. It's not a circle. So as we begin to embrace this galactic paradigm, this is the diagram of the solar system that we should be showing children in schools. The one that we're showing them is basically the Copernican heliocentric paradigm. And we've known now for more than 70 years that this isn't really what's happening. So there's a really big shift here. It's the shift from being at the center of something to being really not at the center of something, but part of something which is really huge and vast. So there's a really different notion that's appearing. And you're seeing this also appearing in our culture in many different ways. We're hitting planetary boundaries. So for instance, we're seeing that like it's not possible to continue logging in the Amazon. It's not possible to basically keep the current culture surviving at the rate that we're using oil. All of these things are coming to a convergence point. They're all reaching a point where things have to change. So what we're beginning to understand is that for our great-great-grandparents, the world was a very much bigger place, and there were boundaries and frontiers that were still being explored with that. But pretty much when the first space missions then projected back the first photos of the Earth from space, a new form of consciousness started emerging in the human realm, which is planetary consciousness, the consciousness of the whole Earth. And the realization, and this was had by all of the astronauts that went out of this very small sphere and looked back and realized that actually this is a really fragile, limited space, and we need to start taking care of it. So I think it's a good job that we're in the midst of a paradigm shift at the moment, because there is, as we begin to understand that our place is basically that we're a participant in a much, much, much bigger universe than the one we'd previously thought about, then we can start to see that actually, yes, we need to take care of our planet, and also that we need to think as a planetary species in order to do that. So let's move on. Okay, so how important is the galaxy? Well, this is some research from the Open University, and what this shows is the orbit of the Sun around the galaxy. Now, these coloured bars are the spiral arms of the galaxy, and we have an unusual motion. We basically move in and out of the spiral arms of the galaxy in a cycle which takes 225 million years for us to return to the same point. So we're here at the moment, and we've just come out of this arm of the galaxy called the Sagittarius arm. We're just emerging from that. It's not like as clearly defined as the edge of this green space, but basically what happens is that we'll go around in this ellipse and return to exactly that same point in a 255 million year cycle. Now, what the guys and women at the Open University did is they looked at this and said, well, this is remarkable, because if you look at like the cycles of major extinctions on our planet, they basically occur very close to points where we either exit or enter spiral arms of the galaxy. So you've got various different extinction events that are recorded in these points here. And here's the last one, which is basically the end of the Cretaceous era, 65 million years ago. So the dinosaur extinction is basically occurring at a point where the Sun and the solar system are leaving the Sagittarius arm of the galaxy. So the galaxy is basically what generated us. We are a product of this cycle. And what we call evolution and extinction are basically synonyms. They're the one and the same thing. So evolution as a species is absolutely part of our galactic evolution. So as we move through each of these areas, that's basically like determining pretty much what's happening with our sun, with our solar system, and obviously that determines what happens on Earth. And a lot of the kind of like the tremors that are happening in the popular imagination, ideas about like invaders and new planets, and these I think these are the kind of like collective unconscious beginning to waken up to the fact that actually, yeah, there's this bigger cycle and we're part of it. If we see ourselves as part of that bigger cycle, then really, you know, we are the same planet that was previously inhabited by dinosaurs that slightly rearranged itself to produce us. So it's a different way of seeing evolution. And it's a more encompassing way. It's, you know, it's seeing it from the point of view that like this is one single whole system. That, you know, our planet and our sun are basically a, you know, we're kind of like fundamentally connected. We can't really remove ourselves in the way that the human species has chosen to do through the period of history and say, oh, well, you know, we're discovering this thing, and it's remarkable that we actually managed to forget it in some ways. But actually, yes, we're part of this, and the division between us and the planet is an arbitrary one, and the division between the planet and the sun is an arbitrary one. So we're part of this system, and actually we're on this incredible ride which is taking us at 11 million miles per hour around the galaxy. So the idea that like things are standing still or cycles are repeating is kind of is not accurate. And what we're seeing now is that these ideas of ellipses and things moving around in a circle, these are falling away, and what we're seeing is that there's a spiral happening, and that's the if there's a kind of like logo motif or a geometry of the new paradigm, it's the spiral. So it's really the change from the circle to the spiral. So in that concept, what we have is we have a situation where things are always dynamic, they're always changing, and they're constantly in a process of evolution. So other effects about our motion around the galaxy. Well, one of the things that's been happening that we've really been like tuning into as a species, especially the Russians, is the effect that moving through space is having on our solar system. Now, the old idea of space was that it was just empty. You know, there was nothing in it, and it was irrelevant to us. You know, it's not something that people spend a lot of time thinking about. Well, actually, that's incorrect, because there's different gradients of energy in space, and very different types of space between, say, moving through the center of a spiral arm and the edge of a spiral arm, and then the space in between spiral arms, all has different energy changes involved with that. And those energy changes directly influence our sun. They directly influence our climate. There's an astrophysicist named Cherviv who did an analysis of meteorites that had landed on this planet over a 500 million year period. And what he discovered was that the biggest driver of climate change on this planet is the galaxy and our relationship to it. So this is a big deal. And what the Russians have been finding out is that as we've been moving through space recently, the amount of energy that we're moving through has increased dramatically. Now, this is a form of energy called plasma, which is the fourth state of matter. And as we move through space, this is the sun here. This is the bigger body of the sun, which is called the heliosphere, which is the energetic envelope that contains all of the planets, the sun, and also, you know, a kind of, all the energy that's generated by the star and all of its products of moving through space. And as we move through space, we generate this Bow-shock wave at the front, which is basically like the impact that the sun's motion causes in relationship to the plasma it's moving through. What the Russians found, specifically studies from Alexei Dmitriev at the National Academy of Sciences in Moscow, was that the amount of plasma which is entering the solar system has increased tenfold in 10 years. That's a really fundamental shift. What we're seeing is that there is basically more energy coming into our solar system. And there's also more energy on this Bow-shock wave. The Bow-shock wave at the front of our solar system, as it moves through space, has increased in density by 3 to 4 times during this period, and that's recorded by NASA. So why should we care about the amount of energy or plasma coming into the solar system? Well, according to the Russian scientists, this is actually the cause of systemic changes which are happening right across the sun and all the planets in the solar system. So if you accept this idea and this theory, then what they're suggesting is that, you know, really this is a coordinated thing, and you know, there's been significant shifts. These are all shifts that have happened on different planets within the last 10 years. So you're seeing changes in the atmosphere of Venus. You're also seeing changes in the atmosphere of the moon. The moon's actually into the first phase of atmosphere creation, according to the Russian scientists. On Mars, you're seeing global warming, significant melting of the polar ice caps, and changes in the atmosphere. And Jupiter's doing some really interesting stuff. The magnetic field of Jupiter has increased pretty much by double, and that's a massive influence on our solar system. It's the largest planet by a huge magnitude. We've also discovered that there's one of the moons of Jupiter, Io, is connected to its parent planet by this incredible flux tube. It's basically like an arcing plasma link between the moon and the planet. So we can't actually see like necessarily in plasmic frequencies, but if you could, you'd see like this huge arcing electrical current, which is basically at least 1 million amps, like running between the moon and Jupiter. It's pretty crazy stuff. On Saturn, you've got an increase in brightness, and in Uranus and Neptune, you've both got major changes in the magnetic poles of both of those planets, which are considered to be magnetically conjunct. So the changes that are happening on this planet aren't happening in isolation. They're happening when changes on other planets are also happening, and the Russian scientists are suggesting that actually this is something which is basically a product of us moving through the galaxy. And this idea of us moving through empty space is one of the things that is basically being like fundamentally challenged here. So here we have the old solar system. That's the comfortable solar system that I grew up with. It's very reassuring. I looked at the sun, and the textbook said the sun will be burning for the next 6 billion years. And I thought, that's great, we don't have to worry about that then. What it didn't say is the sun's moving around the galaxy. And the sun's behavior can change really dramatically. If you look at ice core samples from the Antarctica, you can see that there can be an up to 6-degree temperature shift on our planet in a single year. So climate change isn't something new. Human-made climate change is possibly something new, but there have been significant changes in climate. And according to the research done by Nishaviv, this is actually being driven by the motion of the sun around the galaxy. So other things that are challenging this static view of the solar system, this idea that basically we're one of a very small club, is just simply that we've got bigger telescopes and we're looking out to the boundaries of where things were previously. And welcome to some of the your neighbors in space. These are actually planets and dwarf planets that have been discovered in the last 10 years. So it's not just a question of Pluto being downgraded. It's also, the reason that Pluto was downgraded, it was getting embarrassing because basically a team at Lowell Observatory in the US had been discovering planets at a really frequent rate. And the heliocentric worldview, this idea of our place in the universe, is fundamentally under challenge. And really, the astronomers are doing their best they possibly can do to keep the heliocentric model together, because it's a real fundamental of the way that the current scientific paradigm works. So we're in a really big paradigm shift, and the discovery of these guys really helps us to broaden the idea that actually where we are is we're on a solar system ride with our sun around the galaxy, and it's not just the usual suspects up to Pluto. We've got like lots of other exotic planetoids. What to call them? It's like a dwarf human is still a human, and a dwarf planet is still a planet. So change the words around and you can demote Pluto, but basically the underlying story is that as we begin to explore the boundaries of our solar system, what we're finding is, well, they're really complicated relative to what we thought they were. So, here for instance is Sedna. Now Sedna's a really funky planet. It basically, it comes in almost to the orbit of Pluto, but then it goes out to 1,000 times the distance of the Earth. So it's on a very, very eccentric orbit. You've also got new planets called Quaoar, Orcus. There's one called Makemake. Who knew? It's after a Hawaiian goddess, which is quite nice. So there's lots of different dwarf planets or planets being discovered, and the team at Lowell University Observatory suggests that we could have as many as 20 to 40 planets in our solar system, with perhaps even the majority yet to be discovered. So this is a radically different worldview that's emerging, that's really shifts. It basically means that your simple basic science textbooks have to be rewritten. And if you remember back to that diagram of the sun moving through the galaxy and all the planets spinning around it, that's what we have to move to. We have to move to a notion that basically the galaxy is our center, and that we're part of this very big system called the galaxy, and that is really what the big driver is in human evolution. That you can't really separate human evolution from planetary evolution, and you can't separate planetary evolution from the evolution of our star system, and you can't separate that from the galaxy. They're all different levels, but basically they're all completely inseparable. So some changing things. There's maybe one before that. No, some changing things. We've got more and more probes going up. I'm actually, my background is an amateur astronomer, and one of the things I do like is I like the fact that we've now got these bigger telescopes and we've got probes going up to actually explore like the planet, because the more we learn about it, it's really changing the fundamental way that we view what our planet's like, how sensitive it is, and what its relationship with the sun is. One really thing that's been discovered by a NASA probe called Themis, which is a magnetic measuring probe that was sent up around the planet, is that the magnetic field of the Earth is aligned exactly the opposite way from what was previously thought. So not only that, there is a very large hole in the magnetosphere, which is about 4 times the size of the planet. And that's because the magnetic envelope around the planet extends into a much larger sphere than the planet itself. What does that mean? Well, what that means for us right now is that the magnetic fields of our planet are aligned in such a way that the incoming solar energy is much more penetrating. So we're approaching the peak of the next sunspot cycle, which is coincidentally around 2012, and the chance of a major solar flare happening is greatly increased, and the changes in the magnetic fields of the Earth means that the potential effect of a solar flare is also very substantially increased. Now, that doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen in 2012, that some huge X flare would emerge. The biggest solar flares that we've seen over the last 200-year period have actually not occurred at solar maximum. They appear to be slightly unpredictable from our understanding of the sun. But we have seen very large X-ray flares happen at solar maximums. And with the changes in the magnetic fields and the changes in our understanding of the magnetic fields, it's a significant possibility that we could see a solar flare from the sun having an impact on telecommunications, the internet, and even power lines. Those are all things that can be very directly affected by solar activity. There's a big document called Preparing for Extreme Space Weather that was published by the National Academy of Sciences in the US, and that really covers that in detail. And one of the things they say there, and this is an if thing, it's not saying that there will be a solar flare in 2012. I'm not really doing the prediction game, but what they say is that if there is a major solar flare of the order of something called the Carrington event in the 19th century, there was a really big flare, that it could knock out really substantial parts of the global power grid, and that the issue then is that you get transformer burnout. If you have transformer burnout, you're really stuck in a problem because you need power in order to build transformers. So it could be that substantial parts of the Western world would be without electricity, and for a substantial period of time. So their estimations were that the amount of time that it would actually take for the economy and culture to recover would be between 3 and 10 years. So like the economic impact in the first year of such a flare would be 3 or 4 times that of the entire financial credit crunch crisis story. Can I have a time check? How much more time do we have? Another half an hour, great. We'll have a few questions in a bit. I'm just going to roll through the slides. So another thing, I'm just going to cover these really quickly. I mean, I've written a book called The Everything Guide to 2012, and you can buy it online. Don't have any copies with me. But this covers all of these theories. It's got all of these ideas in there. So if you're more interested in following this up, please check it out. Again, another example of just us really discovering like how complex our planet is, how it interacts with the sun, how the two are conjoined, is we recently discovered that the Earth and the sun are directly connected as a single magnetic system. And it's really funky. It does stuff that we had no idea that it did. So for instance, every 8 minutes around the equator, a magnetic portal, like a kind of magnetic storm, opens up, and a huge amount of cosmic radiation comes in through that portal, and then it closes up again. And this goes on every 8 minutes in a cycle. So the magnetic behavior between our planet and the sun is absolutely co-joined, and we're just beginning to discover it. This is all absolutely brand new. So, we're taking an interest, and that I think is a really, really good thing. because it really reinforces the galactic paradigm, which is really, one of the real fundamentals of that paradigm is seeing our planet as a whole system and indivisible. So, we can't really take the humans out of the planet. We can't take the planet out of the solar system. We can't take the solar system out of the galaxy. All basically different scales of one integrated system. So there's a bit of a shift now. I mean, that was kind of like just covering some of the scientific ideas which are being articulated about this 2012 convergence point. If you just come in, we've been discussing the real astronomy behind the galactic alignment, behind the emergence into a galactic worldview as well. These two things being like a very interesting synchronistic coincidence. And I'd like to introduce another idea, which is about this idea of 2012 being a convergence point. And it comes from the philosophy of Teilhard de Chardin. And he was really looking at the idea of evolution being something which is driving towards a kind of like a creation point. It's kind of the opposite way around to seeing how a lot of people think about like the universe coming into existence and that being like the beginning. He was really interested in the idea that actually we're on our way to some sort of like concrescence, some sort of omega point was the idea that he had, a culminating moment of evolution at a specific point in the near future. And I would hazard to suggest that is exactly what we're on. We're on this cusp. And it isn't just about December 21st, 2012, but it's about macro trends happening within our culture that are forcing this. You can't have an increasing population and a diminishing resource base forever. There has to be a shift. Business as usual is the one thing that's guaranteed not to be happening. At the beginning, I prefaced my talk by saying that the 2012 isn't about the end of the world. In fact, that's a Judeo-Christian projection onto the Mayan calendar system, and that's not what the Maya were talking about, and that we really need to like appreciate and understand that the Mayan culture are basically showing us a more advanced way of understanding time. So I'm just seeding that idea now because I'm really interested in convergence. I mean, I've been studying this for a long time, and I'm really been fascinated by the ideas. But in the last while, I've been really thinking about like, okay, well, if there is a convergence, how do we use it? Because Hollywood already, they're telling us it's going to be a disaster. So as the indigenous Maya themselves are pointing out, this is quite capable of becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. If there are changes, and there are actually natural changes, like the indigenous Maya talk about the sun going dark for between 1 and 2 days, and it's easy if you're in that Judeo-Christian mindset to believe that actually this is the end of the world, and that could be your own sort of undoing. So another idea of convergence. This is the idea of spiral time that comes from the work of Peter Russell. Peter Russell did a groundbreaking book called The Global Brain, which he talks about the human consciousness basically like evolving to the point where we're like becoming like neurons in a global brain. So, this is something which really fits in well with this galactic cosmology, where basically like we're seeing the Earth as a whole system and ourselves as an indivisible part of that. So, there's this idea of a tightening spiral coming to some sort of like concrescence or convergence. You also find it in the ideas of Terence McKenna in Time Wave Zero. And I'm not going to go too much into this at the moment because I want to cover a few other things. So, we talked about paradigm shift and the galactic paradigm shift. This is a big word in commensurability. What it actually means is that the change is systemic. It's not incremental. We're looking at fundamental systemic change. And that's a really important thing to think about in terms of like using this convergence for the best possible outcome. We can either choose to have the programming of Hollywood and say, oh, this is going to be a huge disaster movie, or we can go into a vague New Age ascension model where it's, it's all crystal healing and somehow like it's like a kind of New Age version of the Rapture, in my opinion, a lot of it. But why don't we actually like look at like, well, what are the systemic values that we could actually be putting forward for a new planetary culture, and how do we get that out in a way that's actually going to be effective. So, we're seeing our science change, we need to see our culture change. This is what happens in a paradigm shift. In the last paradigm shift, the Copernican Revolution, you went from the dominance, complete authority of the church to basically the rise of the nation state. So, that's where we are now, as the nation states are the dominant power on our science changes, our culture changes, and we need to get out of a nation mindset, which is a heliocentric worldview, where we can kind of cut the world up and we've still got like this huge, we feel like it's a big place. Well, we've got to come up with a planetary culture. So really, what I'm putting out there is like, a question about what are the values that we want to see in a planetary culture, and how do we put that out into the world. A social model of this is Irvin Laszlo, who's written some great books. I particularly recommend The Chaos Point. That's a really good one. He also wrote World Shift 2012, and there's some World Shift people around at the moment. It's a really simple idea. We're moving from the Logos culture, the logical culture. This is the Romano-Greek social mindset, which is really defined by the preeminence of rationality. It's rational thought. And this kind of reached its high point in the philosophy of Descartes, where there was this fundamental division that was made between mind and matter. It was like, basically a split in the consciousness, a kind of like a planetary like schizophrenia, as far as if you look back from a holistic point of view about what we've done to ourselves in order to actually think about, our world or the earth as a resource. That's how it is. It's like you can view the earth as something which can be divided, bought and sold only when you have that separation between mind and matter. And well, what's emerging? Well, actually, we're sitting in it right now. This is what's emerging. It's holistic culture, and you can see it everywhere in places like this. And this isn't like, we're not at the beginning of this anymore. It's beginning to roll. Since the 70s, we've seen a massive growth in holistic culture, up to the point now where recent demographic surveys have said approximately 30% of US adults now identify with the holistic paradigm. And I think that's pretty similar to what's going on in Europe. So actually, from being like the idea of us being an alternative or marginal culture in relation to this rational world, well, we're actually reaching a tipping point. And it reaches different people in different ways. Some people it reaches through the modality of getting into healing, or changes in their diet, eat more holistically. But that's basically the underlying shift which is occurring on a cultural basis, is that we're moving from rationality towards an integration. These are some suggestions about principles that work within this cultural paradigm shift. Again, normally if I've got a bit more time, I kind of break into these a little bit more, but they're ideas that are basically fractally scalable, that they don't have this mind-matter division built into them. So, resilience is a really good one. You can kind of contrast the idea of resilience. You can have individual resilience, your immune system. You can have community resilience, like, well, what are our food resources? And you've got planetary resilience, which is like biodiversity. And that you can contrast with something like sustainability, where, the word sustainability is an old paradigm word. And it can mean something really cool, but it can also mean sustainable tourism. It can mean sustainable development, and ultimately, when it's used by Exxon or other people, it just becomes another sort of word of greenwashing. And I'm just going to go through this really quite quickly, and point to possible new principles of the new paradigm. Coherence is a really good one, and the emergence of our understanding about this is something that people are looking into in a really scientific way, and not in the old kind of scientific way where it was like we'll just try and have these objective experiments. But the Institute of Heart Math and the Global Coherence Initiative are sponsoring research in over 35 universities looking into things like intuition, and also the effects that our energy fields have outside of the skin-encapsulated ego, outside of our bodies. Some really simple stuff, if you're in a heart-open space, if you've been on the dance floor here and you come out and your heart chakra's really open, you have a magnetic field which is extending outside of your body, and it's actually up to 60 times stronger than if you're just being passive and watching television. So these are real things that you can measure, and this is the sort of stuff that we can begin to use to actually like change the paradigm at the moment. So there's other experiments, and the Global Consciousness Project has shown that coherence is globally scalable. This means if people get together and meditate simultaneously, that there is a scalar effect on our planet, and it's shown by changes in random number generators. But we have scientific research to back up the values that are emerging for this paradigm. It's not kind of like, touchy-feely new age stuff, and we really need to like have more discernment about getting like really like science-based or new science-based perspectives out to the world. The ideas of Bruce Lipton, the evolutionary biologist, fit in with us really well. I really recommend you check out his work. He had one really great take-home concept about what's happening during this period. He said, well, in the transition between the caterpillar and the butterfly, you get this pupa phase. And during that phase, all of the cells in the body basically break down. They become like undifferentiated. So like, our cells differentiate. They become like a fingernail or an eye. But in this phase, they all become undifferentiated. And then these new cells emerge that are called imaginal cells. It's a beautiful idea. And basically what they do is they tell all the other cells what they should become. So as we're doing this shift in paradigm, people who are like turned on to the holistic paradigm, that have an understanding that we must move to a planetary culture, well, we're becoming the imaginal cells in that change. Critical mass. I mean, what do we need in order to make a world shift? What kind of impact can we have? And this is a point. This is kind of like, I don't have a firm opinion about this, but for instance, the Maharishi University were putting out that if you had like what they call yogic flyers, people who are like fully like trained meditators who are really dedicated to that, you would only need the square root of 1% of humanity. So 8,241 in that particular case, people really trained to the highest possible level of meditation, then you could see a shift in global consciousness. Other people have suggested 1% of the population. It varies, 10%, but the idea of there being a critical mass, and then what we're looking at in a paradigm shift is we're looking at systemic change. So, the idea here is that for a while, holistic culture has been thought of as an alternative culture. I really hope that we can remove that notion like fundamentally. We're not an alternative culture. What we are is the new culture. And that really is an important differentiation to make. So we're emergent, but that's what the story is. So that notion of us being marginal, look at these funny people, they dress differently, is, this is something that can really like be challenged. Another good, really like rock solid pop science book, if you want to follow this a little bit further, is called The Intention Experiment. It's written by Lynn McTaggart. She previously wrote The Field. This is a really, really good book about the impact our intentions and observations have on reality. It's a direct thing that you can show, and I just suggest you read this book. So that kind of like covers the talk. I basically just wanted to sort of like put a few things forward about like what's actually happening with the Mayan calendrical system, what 2012 really represents within that. If you're here at the beginning, hopefully you caught that bit. And the second part was really about the paradigm shift from the heliocentric worldview to the galactocentric worldview. Basically moving from the idea that we move around the sun, and the new idea is the sun moves around the galaxy. So what to do, and that's what I've been like working on for the last couple of years. Not just look at these interesting theories. What can we actually do? And this is what I'm involved in. This project is called Peace 2012, and it's using these ideas to say, okay, like what about we use 2012 as a convergence point? Let's actually just try this stuff out. Let's see if we can get a critical mass of people to put their intentions together at a synchronized moment so that we can actually see the results of a planetary shift. So what we're doing at the moment is we have a website up called peace2012.net. You can find it online now. We have a Facebook campaign and a Twitter campaign. And it's basically a campaign of peaceful action and positive news. So, you can plug anything into that you choose, and please share this. This is how it's going to happen, if it's going to happen. It needs to be done by people rather than big media. And the goal that we're looking at is just having a single moment of planetary synchronization, just one moment. That's all we're going to go for on December 21st, 2012. And there'll be this worldwide event that'll be linked through the internet. But fundamentally, what we're going to do is we're going to have a link up with our intentions, so that ideally what we'll show out of that is a measurable effect on our reality. And also, that, you know, we get to like a positive meme as opposed to like really gacking out on the fear porn that's being put in front of us. So we're really getting stuff together with this. There's another great campaign coming together called the Push for Peace, which is a mega compilation of lots of peace NGOs. And basically what's happening with them is they're doing a 90-day global call to action, which runs between the International Day of Peace and December 21st, 2012. So, you know, the people are beginning to see, like, okay, like we might not even care about 2012, but we really care about peace, so let's put that out into the world. And finally, a plug for my book, which is called The Everything Guide to 2012. It's available hopefully at your independent bookstore, where that's the best place to get it. Order it if they don't have it. Please do that. I really believe in independent bookstores. If you don't have one locally, you can get it online from Amazon. And there's also a Kindle and ebook version, which is called 101 Things You Need to Know About 2012. Thank you. That's Jeff Stray, who was one of the, very kindly did a lot of the copy editing and was very, very helpful in making this a good book, if it's a good book. So, thank you very much. Do we have time for questions, or are we going to go straight on to the next thing? Hugh?
Okay.
Okay.
If hands up, and I'll bring the mic to anyone who wants it. Whoever I see first. Okay.
Yes, hello. I wasn't here the whole time, but I would like to ask what you know about NASA. They were writing articles, and it came in many big newspapers that in May 2013 there will be a big solar storm, which will be so powerful that there is no technology on Earth that can do anything about it, and it will leave parts of the infrastructure, the technology, internet, everything will be down for a really long time, and it will take years to build it back up again. So, and I don't know if it was to scare people off that they put it on the front page of many papers, or if it is real. It's in 2013, May 2013, they're predicting a storm as big as it was in the 1800th century, when big parts of the sky was red, and now we have technology, so the technology can't take it.
Okay, yeah, I did cover this. Basically, there is no exact science of the prediction of solar flares. The really big solar flare that you're talking to didn't occur at a solar maximum. So when you come across that kind of stuff that's like making, you know, like cast time predictions, it's invariably wrong. You know, we don't know. The chance of a larger scale solar flare happening is significantly increased. So that's the kind of the actuality. But, you know, predictions in general tend to be wrong. So, like, you know, that's something to be aware of. Anyone else behind you?
So, well, the new galactic science that you're sharing with us seems to be 101 Dogon first face knowledge that is very available to many of the scientists who are purporting that this is new science. It's not new science, it's old science. And I'm sure you're familiar with Dogon cosmology. Exact same thing, the spirals, the in and outs and things like that, and that the Earth moves throughout the galaxy. and is intimately tied with the Sirius star system. And as far as 2012, I knew that basically nothing's happening December 20, whatever, 2012, other than our intention. Well, I'm getting to the question. Other than our intention. So, since ancient peoples say they deal with cycles, what you're proposing is to use the intention of a mass congruence of people on the earth to bring about an intention to bring about this paradigm shift. Is that what you're saying?
I am. I'm saying that it's happening anyway, and that it's always been happening, and we're just waking up to the fact that it's happening. But let's use it.
Anyone else?
You talked about a cultural shift and that we're in a nation state mindset as far as humanity goes at the moment. Would it be, we might also actually look at the fact that the real power lies with multinational corporations. So in fact, they're the people who are really pulling the strings in terms of humanity. So while we, the public, think, largely thanks to the media, that we're in a nation state mindset, actually we are in a global mindset, but it's money and profit that controls the global mindset. So I wondered if you have, are we actually moving in that way towards this balance?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think Teilhard de Chardin actually had a really good point about this. It was, okay, globalization. You know, multinational corporations discovered a long time ago that nation states weren't really where it's at. So, you know, what is that? Is that another example of planetary consciousness? The answer is absolutely not. But actually, what this is the terminal stage of the current paradigm, where it's basically banging up against the planetary the boundaries. What Teilhard de Chardin proposed was an idea of planetization. And planetization is almost the opposite of globalization, because really, for a planetary culture to emerge, what we need is genuinely planetary institutions. Look at the UN, the United Nations. Well, of course, that's not going to work because it's based on nation states. It's not really speaking for the whole of the planet. So one of the people I think is really good on this subject as well is Adi Dar, who wrote a book called Not Two is Peace, where he's talking about the emergence of a global cooperative forum. And basically, that's what has to kind of, and institutions like it have to occur. You know, we really need to reach this point of basically where everything can happen at once, and the planetary institutions, the ones that are genuinely speaking for the Earth, those are the ones that we need to invest our energy into. And of course, what globalization is like the shadow kind of, you know, meme to that. And it's nothing more than basically the terminal stage of capitalism.
Any more questions?
We done?
Oh, I had a question actually, Mark.
Go on then.
You mentioned the poles of the Earth's electromagnetic field had been found out to be different from what they'd previously been supposed to be.
It's not the poles. It's
Right.
actually the alignment of the field.
Yeah.
It's the inside and outside charges. So it's not the north and south poles, which are. It's basically they're reasonably complex in terms of like how they work, but the positive alignment on the outside and the negative alignment on the inside are the things that have actually. We discovered when Themis was set up that it's exactly the opposite from what NASA were predicting it would be.
What's the significance of that? Just that
Well,
NASA
actually,
got it wrong?
Well, NASA got it wrong, but actually it changes its phase, and when it's in this phase, it can actually accelerate solar and cosmic radiation rather than acting as a protective boundary. So, you know, we're basically in the situation where our magnetic shields are in a really different place from what we thought they were. It means that we're, you know, the likelihood is if there was a really a Carrington event-sized flare, you know, which we haven't seen for over 150 years, and it didn't occur at a solar maximum. If there was an event like that, you'd be looking at the very least, global telecommunications, the internet, all of these things really being like knocked out or being very sporadically effective, and the likelihood of widespread disruption to the power grid. But there's, you know, please note the ifs.
Yeah, great. Nolan.
Mark, what do you know of the Earth actually been in the process of evolution as well, and certain events that are going on at the moment, such as earthquakes, being part of the growing pains, and the whole theory about the polar shifts that the Earth rights itself on its axis, maybe moving 17 degrees into somewhere like Russia. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the snapshot on the poles is that the rate of acceleration of the magnetic poles has increased. But that doesn't indicate that there necessarily is a magnetic pole shift in about to happen. Obviously, if the poles are accelerating, then that's more likely, but it's not more likely by an order of magnitude. So we don't really know. We actually haven't been around to study a magnetic pole shift. The idea that the Earth is evolving, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the central point of this idea is that we are like indivisible from the Earth, and the Earth is indivisible from the solar system, and the solar system's evolution is driven by the galaxy, so ergo us and the planet are co-evolving. So like one of the things we have to get out of the mindset of is that, the way we've looked at the Earth is as a resource and is different from us. So we have to dissolve that and actually realize that, yeah, the Earth is evolving, we're evolving, and we're not leaving the galaxy anytime soon. Cool, I think we're done. Is that all right? Cheers. Thank you. I think, Nathan, you're next up. Is that right?
I am, yes.
Great.
My talk is about the Galactic Centre itself. It covers quite a bit of the same, or it was going to cover quite a bit of the same areas what Mark's been talking about. It's wonderful. I'd like to thank you personally, Mark, for that talk. It's been fantastic.
Thanks, Nathan.
Really good to hear a talk that's sensible about 2012. I hope mine is too. I'll be looking at some of the archetypes, kind of poetic archetypes, and looking more at the black hole at the centre of the galaxy, which is something that thankfully Mark didn't mention. So I've got quite a bit of information about the black hole.